welcome to the BioHub. Today we're honoured to have Dr. David Mazzo with us. David is the president and CEO of Lisata Therapeutics, a company dedicated to developing innovative therapies for advanced solid tumours and other major diseases. With a career spanning over 40 years in the pharma industry, we have so much to discuss. We'll dive into David's journey, the evolution of Lisata following the merger with Caladrius Biosciences and Cend Therapeutics, and their lead product candidate. He'll also share insights on making tough decisions, fostering a dynamic culture, and the future of oncology treatment. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. David Mazzo. Welcome, David. How are you?
I'm very well, Max. Thank you very much for having me today. It's really a great pleasure.
Amazing. Let's just start off. Just start by introducing yourself and giving us a brief overview of your background and journey in the pharma industry.
Certainly, it's a pleasure to do so. My journey is a little bit untraditional in the sense that I'm a chemist by training, actually an analytical chemist. I did my PhD at the University of Massachusetts and then did some research fellowship work in Switzerland. I've always had a propensity for working internationally, and that started from very, very early in my journey. I moved from academic world to Merck and worked not in the traditional chemistry areas, but actually in an exploratory pharmaceutics unit, which was sort of the first deviation that I took. And from that point on, I migrated through a variety of large pharma companies, each time taking a step up in responsibility, but most importantly, broadening my experiences from solid dosage forms to hospital products, from antivirals and anti-hypercholesteremics, all the way to women's health products, and of course, cardiovascular products and oncology products. I spent about 25 years in big pharma, many of them as an executive in R&D for a number of international companies working based in Europe or in the United States with global responsibilities. And for the last 20-odd years, I've been in several small companies, emerging pharmaceutical companies that have been working on innovative technologies and working in an atmosphere that I think is highly conducive to creativity, but of course is much more pressure-packed because we don't have the budgets or the financial backing of an entire huge conglomerate like you would with a major pharmaceutical company. But it's been a great journey. My family and I have traveled around the world, exposed to all different cultures and language, but most importantly, I think I'm very happy to have been involved in the development efforts that have produced scores of products to help patients in a variety of therapeutic areas.
That's amazing. It's amazing. Let's just focus on Lisata. Let's just talk about the evolution of the company, especially the merger of Caladrius and Cend as well. I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, so it's interesting how things work out. We're sitting here today, and I think we can look back and describe what transpired relative to Caladrius, and then ultimately what created Lisata as us being prescient. But at the time, they were risky and difficult decisions to take. Caladrius, the predecessor company of Lisata, was a publicly listed company working in ischemic diseases based on cellular therapies. Okay. And we were actually doing quite well, generating very positive clinical data and moving products through phase 2. We even had product ready to go into phase 3. But two things caused us to question whether that path was the sole path we should continue on. One was the evolving regulatory landscape around cellular therapies, and which was making things difficult. To use a sports analogy, the goalposts kept moving, and then the other was the fact that the marketplace didn't seem to be able to understand the strategy of personalized medicine and how it could be applied in great numbers, right? And these are all personalized medicine applications. That, coupled with the COVID-19 pandemic, which basically shut down our clinical programs because patients couldn't access clinics and hospitals, gave us the opportunity to think about diversification and what we could do to make our company survive the pandemic, be more sustainable. And we ultimately, after much discussion and research, decided that moving into an oncology platform would probably be better, because even in the midst of COVID-19, cancer patients were finding a way to be treated. cancer is always a place where money seems to flow because it's such a devastating health problem. And importantly, it's an area where, based on early results, again, because the medical need is so high, you often have the opportunity to have a path to an accelerated approval. And so we decided to look for an oncology asset. After scouring almost 400 different assets and companies over the course of 18 months, we came upon Cend Therapeutics and ultimately decided that acquisition made the most amount of sense. And since then, we have completely transformed what was then Caladrius into now Lisata, focused entirely on what was the Cend technology and ameliorating treatments for solid tumor cancers, which remain an enigma when it comes to positive outcomes for patients.
How was that transition as well? Like, I suppose from an employee perspective as well, like it must have seemed quite turbulent from the top. How transparent are you with people in the company as well?
Well, it actually went remarkably smoothly, and I think
Okay.
part of that I can attribute to some of my experiences in big pharma, because at when I was at Rohrer, which became part of Rhone Poulenc Rohrer, I went through what I think most people at the time would have considered a very successful merger of two very different organizations. And then I've been part of other organizations where I've got to witness not so successful integrations. So I've had a good, example of what to do and what not to do. What made our transition from Caladrius to Lisata easy and made the integration somewhat seamless was, I think, first and foremost, the head of Cend Therapeutics, David Slack, and I were completely open and transparent with each other from day one.
Yeah.
And that, even though David is no longer with Lisata, he's actually running one of our spin-off companies, Impello Therapeutics. That remains the case. So honesty, transparency, timeliness of communication, I think, is important at all levels. And that was what really helped. And also, we had a very clear conversation between the managements and boards of both companies on what expectations were and what goals were, so that we had a common alignment of what we were trying to achieve. And once we both agreed that, in fact, we weren't kidding each other or ourselves, and that we were completely in sync, the rest became easy, because it really, at the end of the day, is about putting together an organization and a system that would allow us to eventually help patients and bring this technology to the forefront. And that's really, we're all in this because we want our investors to do well, we want our employees to do well and be happy. But, deep down, this is somewhat of a more noble endeavor. We really want to do something that will make patients' lives better.
Yeah, I find that dynamic so interesting. Yes, we are a business. We have investors that we have to keep happy, but ultimately, like the star of the show is the science, the technology, the end outcome. I think it's a crazy dynamic when you think about it. Yeah.
It is, but one of the things that we've learned, and again, based upon my many years of experiences, it turns out that, for the most part, obviously some people can always find one or two exceptions, but I think in the great majority of cases, if you focus on the science and the medicine, you focus on bringing your products to quick and unambiguous decision points and either getting them to market as quickly as possible, or not wasting further money on them and moving to something else. I think in the end, that serves patients best. And when you serve patients best, you ultimately serve your investors best as well.
Yeah, 100%. But you've obviously been in the industry for a long time, for over 40 years. How have you seen the pharma and biotech landscapes change, and I suppose particularly oncology?
Yeah, I think, Max, the biggest change for me is the fact that when I started in the industry, and remember, this was in the 80s and 90s, so it's a long time ago, big pharma was, in what many people might characterize as the golden age. They were cranking out blockbuster products fairly regularly, and they were organized as these singular, all-encompassing machines. So you had in-house discovery, followed by development, followed by manufacturing, marketing. Well, everything was in one place. It was one-stop shopping. And over the years, for financial reasons and I would say societal reasons as well, that has evolved. And now a great deal of innovation comes from small companies like ours. For whatever reason, big pharma has decided that it is more lucrative and more efficient for them to purchase discoveries that have been brought to a certain level of de-risking than to run complete pipeline generating activities internally. And so that's a big change because it's allowed for an environment of small companies like ours to evolve, develop, and to provide for investors, a very potentially lucrative opportunity. And really, I think the idea is that small companies are nimbler. We have to be more creative because we don't always have the ability to just throw money and people at problems. We have to do it with brains. And so, I think that's allowed for this whole new set of companies, which created a lot of opportunity and a lot of innovation. And I think there's a symbiotic relationship now between what many people refer to as biotech, but it's really biopharmaceutical, biotechnology, small emerging companies, and big pharma companies. We kind of rely on each other. In the one case, they rely on us for innovation and taking a lot of early risks. And when we rely on them for, ultimately partnering and what would hopefully be lucrative exits.
Yeah. Do you think, you talk about Genentech are a great example of someone who rose to what they are. Do you think that's possible, really, for companies to go from nothing to big pharma size, or in today's
I think
age?
Absolutely. Yeah. I do think it's possible. I'm not sure it's going to be common. And the reason is that the skill sets necessary along the way evolve, right? And so it's one thing to be running a company that is totally focused on early discovery, another to be running a development company that's looking to bring products to market, and yet another to run a commercial entity where you have to balance your focus between generating profit and continuing to have a sustainable pipeline. And I think that requires different organizations of different sizes with different people. And it seems to be the order of the world today in the pharmaceutical industry that once companies get to the transition between late stage development and into commercialization, that's the point when they're often acquired, or at least their assets are, by big pharma who are running very large commercial distribution, sometimes manufacturing organizations. And those are very expensive and costly things to create organically. Mm-hmm. So it just seems natural to sort of hand the ball off at that point in time. So I think it's possible for a company to grow to be that way, but it'd be very specific, I think, to either a single product or product platform. But of course, all of us in this industry have the challenge of having to plan to do that. Yeah. Because you can't plan on your product being acquired or your company being acquired at a valuation that you believe is commensurate with the value of the product and the return on investment expected by your investors. So that's the dilemma. You have to plan to take it all the way through to the end yourself, but maybe the aspiration is that you won't take that journey alone.
Yeah, there's so many factors, isn't there? I find that, crazy as well. Like the decision making. I suppose you get approached, or there's potential options to have those partnerships, and it's like, when do I pull the trigger? When's the right time? Is such a hard choice.
Exactly. And when you're in an environment like we've been in financially, I don't mean at Lisata, but the industry specifically, where financing has become a bit more difficult, money is more expensive and less available. Those early offers, which maybe in the past would have been rejected out of hand, now have to be taken quite seriously, because you don't know what the situation will be 12, 18, 24 months down the road, independent of how compelling your data might be because of the macro and financial environment. So it does make it for for a bit of a game of chicken. How long do we wait before we say yes, that's the right number, and have we done what's best for patients and for our shareholders by taking this as far as we have, or should we take it further?
Yeah. I mean, I've even seen it from a recruitment standpoint. The demand for BD executives is gone up massively, and it's because fundraising is harder and they're looking at other options. So yeah, I've definitely seen that. I always ask this. I think culture is something I'm truly fascinated by, and Avetix are truly fascinated by. How do you go about looking at culture, and why is it important for success?
So it's interesting because unbeknownst to me, when I was doing my first degrees at university, I did a combination degree of a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry and a Bachelor of Arts in something called the Honors Program, which was an interdisciplinary humanities program. I did it because it was interesting. I didn't have any particular plan in mind. I wanted to be a scientist. But I look back now and I realize that all of those early studies in humanities really were management courses that most scientists don't have the opportunity to get. And so I was given, quite by chance, a pretty good basis in psychology, sociology, and the things that motivate people. Gave me a chance to self-reflect what motivated me, what I liked about how I was managed, what I didn't like, what I would change, etc. And all of those things have been molded into the kind of culture that I create in my companies. I think, it comes back to some of the things, of course, that were shown me as good examples from my early days in big pharma, respect, communication that was transparent, being a good listener, being listened to. All of those things are really important for people at all levels. And then from my time in Europe, where I learned that, it's kind of ironic. I was brought to France because I was supposed to bring an American style of management to the French pharmaceutical groups that I was managing. And what turned out was this interesting amalgam of being able to go with a little bit more risk, a little less analysis, a little faster, but also me learning that you need to listen to everybody at all levels, even if they're all going to agree. You need to give everybody their chance to say something, because that's how you have complete organizational buy-in to what you're going to do. You need to treat people with respect. You need to treat people with balance. So we all, especially in small companies, we work hard, we work crazy hours. In the international world, it's a 24-hour clock. But you also have to recognize that for people to put out like that consistently, you have to be flexible. You have to give them the opportunity to have a balanced life, to do things with their family when they need to. And I find that when you provide that environment, first of all, everyone helps everyone. And in the end, when you really have a crisis, you never have an issue with people all coming all hands on deck and all working together to solve a problem, because they know that when they need time to do something personal, they can take it with no issue. And it really comes also back to telling people the absolute truth about what's going on all the time. So we don't hide our financial situation, which knock wood is reasonably stable and has been for a while. But we tell people, well, we're going to have to raise money. We're running out of money. Money is difficult. We tell people, our data is looking good or our data isn't looking good. Of course, we do our studies now blinded, so it's hard to divulge anything until we know an answer. But I think that's how culture, really is developed. And it's a bit of a cliche, and I would never try to actually compare a true, family unit with a company team. But there are similarities, and I think we become family-like in that regard, simply because we all can speak to each other openly, sometimes with a bit of passion and emotion. We get over it quickly, and we all, have each other's back.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I completely agree with you on the flexibility front. Um, we're all good at our jobs. You deserve the flexibility to, especially when you're on an international clock. Um, I worked at a company that was set hours. You're in at this time, your lunch is at this time.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm in the UK, predominantly working US. If I've got a call with California, I'm going to be taking it at, 11 at night or whatever. And, that technically not in my hours. It's
Right.
crazy, really.
It's
You've got
exactly the same for my team. We have a number of actually, the majority of our studies are running either in Europe or in Australia. So that means, middle of the night calls, very early morning, late nights, and so on. How can I legitimately expect my people to, yeah, and, so first of all, I have to lead by example. So I have to participate in all those things. I can't expect them to do things I wouldn't do. But at the same time, how can I expect people to be willing to take a call at 3 in the morning? If they would be chastised for taking off an hour at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to meet their children from the school bus or to take them to their
Yeah,
football practice or something. It has to be a give and take. And I find that when companies give a little, they actually get multiples back in return.
that's so true. So true. Yeah, and I think as well, you've got to be careful with the people you hire as well. How bought in they are, and
Mhm.
you give them that bit, and you've got to make sure you hire the right people. I think it was interesting what you said as well, that you almost modelled it off yourself in terms of how you want it to be
Right.
managed. And when you talk about that, do you think about who you're going to hire and maybe they have a similar mindset to you, or is to
I
be wanting
do.
to
I
be
mean,
managed like that?
we talk to people about, of course, their scientific competence, their experience in the development world for pharmaceuticals, et cetera. But we also, talk about their values, and what's important to them, and how they fit in to the company. Are they comfortable speaking their mind freely all the time? We're not very hierarchical. Obviously, certain decisions have to go to certain levels because that's what people are often rewarded to do. But in the end, you have to be able to have people who are willing to speak up. And I have sort of a management mantra that's pretty simple to people. I tell them that I don't like any drama. So no drama is the first one. And by that I mean, you can't fester, you can't harbor ill feelings. You have to speak out. You have to be an adult and tell
Yeah,
people what you're thinking, right? I also don't like surprises. So no surprises. We don't want to get to a deadline and then find out, oops, we had a problem and we didn't make it. We want people to come forward always and speak out, especially for the hard things. And the last one is no missed deadlines. And we establish deadlines together. And unless something outside of our control completely has an impact, then we're all committed to getting it done, and then we get it
yeah,
done. And so those simple mantras combined with something that I attribute back to my Merck days, where I was kind of taught do the last experiment first. So get to the answer, get to the bottom line. You can always go back and fill in the blanks that are necessary, the accoutrements, if you will, that are necessary to move things along from a regulatory other. But you need to know, will this be a drug? Will this work in a competitive way? Will it be tolerated by patients? And will we be able to make it and sell it for a price that the market will bear? And those things are sort of the fundamental questions you have to answer early on, or as early as you can during development. If you leave them all to the end, you've potentially wasted a lot of time and money.
yeah. I think it's really interesting what you said as well about you want people who are going to speak out. I think that's so true. We actually speak about it quite often. We don't want it's actually really dangerous to have a bunch of yes men around you,
Right. Mm-hmm.
who just agree with you. You want that idea driven culture. The best idea wins, despite who it comes from. I 100%
It,
agree
it,
with that.
exactly.
Um, yeah, I mean, we might cover some of the same points here, but just looking back at your experience, what key lessons have you learned and, or I suppose, are applying to Lisata to drive success?
So maybe I'll go beyond a little bit about people and culture because we've discussed that a bit, and talk a little bit about our internal strategy, which provides us with a bit of a dilemma. So the baseline strategy that I think I've taken from my time in the pharmaceutical industry is that, despite the brightest people working with the newest technologies, in areas with all the resources available to them, bringing new, effective, affordable drugs to market remains really, really hard. And I think we all know the statistics, from every, drug, you need to screen 10,000 compounds in early discovery, and go through the entire development process to get one commercially successful drug over the course of 10 or 12 years. And I don't know what it's up to now, over $1 billion of investment. So it's really, really hard. And the idea that, we're all going to purchase a lottery ticket and base the entire future of a company, people's livelihoods, investors' money, patients' faith on a single product in a single indication, to me is extremely risky and, in fact, probably not terribly prudent. I was going to say stupid, but I'll be more polite. So one of the things we've learned is you need diversification in your pipeline. You need to be able to, again, another sports analogy, have multiple shots on goal, and maybe to take that a step further, in multiple games. You need to be able to not just be doing the same thing. So, we're looking at our lead program, which is called certepetide, or formerly LSTA1, LSTA1, and we're looking at developing that, in metastatic pancreatic cancer, where we're quite far along in the development process, but also showing that we can use it in combination with many other anti-cancer agents of different modalities in a variety of different solid tumor applications, and maybe even outside of oncology. The idea is to provide as many opportunities for a win for investors and patients as possible, because, picking a single horse is very, very difficult and likely not to be successful. And so that's probably the primary driver of our philosophy within Lisata, getting to quick answers on those fundamental questions I mentioned early, so we don't continue to put money and resources behind something that doesn't have a chance to be successful. And at the same time, always looking for diversification of approach, of compound, and of indication.
Yeah, and I suppose this leads on perfectly. How do you go through the decision-making process, and I suppose what's the mindset of, making the right decision for tough ones?
Well, and this is where we go back to that people issue. So, a number of years ago, I needed to bring on a new chief medical officer, and I was really fortunate to find Dr. Kristen Buck, who's our CMO now. And Kristen and I think very similarly about a lot of things, but we think differently enough so that we can challenge each other and always drive ourselves to the best, but one of Kristen's fundamental tenets is that, designed with the end in mind. So she puts together the development programs with the idea of, we want to get to a commercial product that needs to be, competitive, affordable, and accessible. And, and so everything we do is designed to give us constant feedback on whether or not that will be the case or not. And if it is, we keep going. And if it's not, that's when we stop. Again, it's about efficient development and learning not to become emotionally or viscerally involved with your products, but letting them go when they don't look like they're going to be meeting those criteria, that criteria of success. And so I think that's, that's really an important aspect of how we approach things. And again, it comes down to quick decisions and being unemotional about them. It's all about the data. And that's, to some extent, what makes this easy. If you take the emotion out of, we put a lot of time and effort, we have a lot invested, et cetera, and you just simply do the right experiment, and then the data tells you the answer. And as long as you don't kid yourself, to use another, cliche, you don't drink your own Kool-Aid, then it becomes easier to take those difficult decisions. Now, what makes those decisions more difficult is sometimes they impact the organization and people. And, but if you've been honest with people all along, and they know the kind of journey they're on, and the risks that they're taking and the rewards that they will get if we're successful, then even that becomes easier because you know that everybody's gone into this with their eyes wide open.
That must get so much easier though with the more experience you've had. I imagine that's quite a hard concept to get your head around if you're a young CEO founder, for example.
It
Starting
often
out.
is. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Especially if you're a first-time CEO or a founder, and you've put your life's work, or even if you've just been around a long time working on one thing, and your life's work has been invested in something. It's hard to look at it and say it's not going to make it. That's a very difficult decision, and it comes, unfortunately, with experience and practice. I've been fortunate enough to be participant, as I said earlier, to programs that have yielded scores of successful products internationally. But for that, but I had, a multiple of that where I was involved where things didn't work out. So you have the battle scars, and it comes with experience, really.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. As long as you can try and take the emotion out of it, then it gets easier. But that's so much easier said than actually done.
Exactly.
Let's just talk about Lisata's technology. Can you just discuss, what's challenging about the cancer indications that the company are targeting, and why that's the area you're focusing on?
So we've chosen solid tumors as our area of focus for two reasons. One of those reasons is that this remains a very challenging area, a very important area of high unmet medical need. Most solid tumors, this is pancreatic cancer, colon cancer, appendiceal cancer, people can go down the list, lung, etc. These are cancers that, for the most part, have very poor prognoses, even with the treatments that are available. And for many of these cancers, there haven't been new treatments literally in decades. Some of the technologies that people have heard about that have made great inroads in other areas, like cellular therapies, the CAR T therapies, or monoclonal antibodies, or drug conjugates, or even sRNA technologies, for reasons that I can describe technically, simply haven't made that kind of impact in solid tumors. So, there's really a very high unmet medical need. The other reason we chose these is that the technology that we're developing has a mechanism of action that makes it perfectly suited to address the two things that make solid tumors difficult to treat. One of those is a layer of cells that surrounds these tumors, that's called the tumor stroma, which acts as a physical barrier preventing the infiltration of drugs into the tumor. And the other is a tumor microenvironment that's immunosuppressive, that helps hide the tumor from your immune system and from immunotherapy so that they aren't recognized as foreign and aren't attacked. And our technology, and I can go into detail, but it'll take a bit of time, so I would suggest anybody interested go to our website. There's a video, and there's also some written material there that would describe it. Allows for us to turn that stroma from a barrier into a conduit for the transport of anti-cancer drugs into the tumor. So it's a targeting and penetration technology. And certepetide also has the ability to modify the tumor microenvironment, making it more immunoreceptive, meaning that it causes the migration of cytotoxic T cells into the microenvironment to help unhide the tumor and allow your immune system and immunotherapies to attack it more readily. It being certepetide also has the ability to inhibit the metastatic cascade. So it helps stop the spread of these cancers, which is another big problem associated with these solid tumors. So we've chosen these areas because they're hard. And people will often say, well, you've chosen the most difficult cancers to treat. Why would you do that? Why don't you go someplace where it's easy? Well, because easy is already being done effectively. Hard is where the people need the new innovation and the new treatments. And this is also where we have the greatest opportunity to make a difference for patients and to make the kind of return that I think our investors would like. They're in the biotech investment world because they understand it's high risk, high reward. So if you design your programs smartly, you choose your targets, appropriately, then you can achieve that balance between high risk and high reward. And hopefully we're moving on the high reward path towards success.
Yeah, definitely. Where are you at now with, I suppose, ongoing clinical trials, and what milestones are you looking to achieve soon?
So we're actually fairly far along with certepetide in metastatic ductal adenocarcinoma, pancreatic cancer. We've completed enrollment in a very large, double-blinded, randomized, placebo-controlled phase 2b trial that's powered to show an important clinical benefit. That's unusual for phase 2, but it's not unusual in the oncology field because on compelling phase 2 data, you have the possibility of getting an accelerated or conditional approval. So we're maximizing that probability by doing this study, which is highly scientifically rigorous. We'll have data from that trial no later than the fourth quarter of this year. And that will be seminal for the company and for the product in this indication. In parallel, we're looking at certepetide in combination, and that's being done, by the way, that's called the Cend trial. That phase 2b is being done, certepetide in combination with gemcitabine nab-paclitaxel, which is a chemotherapy regime that is considered standard of care for pancreatic cancer. But we're also looking at combining certepetide with other standards of care for other solid tumor types, other forms of pancreatic cancer, colon cancer, appendiceal cancer, glioblastoma or brain cancer, etc., and even in combination with immunotherapies. And one of the more promising leads we've had recently is our first-line cholangiocarcinoma study, which is bile duct cancer, where, again, blinded studies to make them scientifically rigorous, but where the investigators have been calling Kristen, our CMO, and saying, you have to do more here. Things are looking really, really promising. And we would say, but, it's blinded, so how can you know? And they say, well, we know it's blinded, but some of our patients are doing things that are uncharacteristically good for people with this type of cancer. So we have to assume that those are the treatment patients and that it's your product. And so, based upon that enthusiasm and that motivation, we'll be opening a second-line cholangiocarcinoma trial soon. And, and again, all these are anecdotal, but we have lots of indications that the product is doing what it's supposed to do, and hopefully will make a difference that will be meaningful for patients, which again translates into benefit for everybody.
No, that's incredible. And I think just listening to you talk, I can often tell with talking to people like you where your priorities lie, and the way you talk about patients and how passionate you are about it, I think really shines through. I think it's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, as we said, that's perhaps one of the things that we try to tease out when we're interviewing people for Lisata. We want to be sure that they understand that it's a business, it's not a philanthropic organization, but that it all starts with strong science and medicine focused on patients, and then everything else sort of follows appropriately. And it's easy sometimes to put your personal growth first, or the financial returns of one investor or a group of investors first. But I think you have to keep everything in balance. And in the end, this is a technology, science-driven endeavor, and it's the science done properly that will lead to results that will benefit everyone.
Yeah, amazing. I think that's a great place to finish it. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, David. I found it so fascinating and definitely exciting times ahead.
Thank you, Max. Yes, we're very excited. You and your audience, keep your eyes on us. We'll see what our data looks like toward the end of this year. Hopefully things will continue to go very well for us. And once again, I do appreciate the opportunity to have this chat. It's been really enjoyable.
Amazing. Thank you so much, David. Thank you.
Cheers.